When did you realize your friend didn't care about you? In college, I was roommates with this girl, Chrissy, and we both dreamed of studying abroad in Florence through our university's art history program. Only 2 students from our school got selected each year, and we'd been working toward it since we were freshmen. We took Italian together, volunteered at museums, loaded up on extra art classes, everything we could think of. Chrissy and I had been super close for 3 years. We'd stay up talking about how amazing it would be to study Renaissance art in actual Florence. When we both made it to the final round, we were so excited. The last step was this intense weekend interview process with professors and program alumni. Since I'd done a ton of research on Renaissance architecture, I agreed to help her prep for the technical questions. I spent hours going through my notes with her, sharing everything I'd learned. The night before interviews started, I was driving back from the library around 9 p.m. when this intoxicated driver ran a red light and slammed into my car. I remember the impact, then waking up in an ambulance with paramedics telling me I had a severe concussion and multiple broken ribs. Chrissy got the call from the hospital around 11 p.m. When she showed up, I was barely conscious and kept drifting in and out, but I could hear her talking to the nurse about how important tomorrow is for both of us. When I managed to tell her I obviously couldn't make the interviews, she said, "Well, maybe you'll feel better by morning. Head injuries can seem worse than they are." I'm sitting there with a brain injury, and she's acting like I have a headache. The next morning, I'm still in the hospital and can barely form complete sentences, but I managed to text her asking if she'd call the program coordinator to explain what happened. When she visited that afternoon, I had all these messages from family and friends, but nothing really sympathetic from her. Instead, she said, "That's too bad, but since you can't interview anyway, could I maybe use your Renaissance research for my presentation? It would really help me stand out." I was still groggy and confused, so I just told her where my notes were in our dorm. 3 days later, I was still in the hospital because the concussion was worse than they thought, and I got a call from our program coordinator. She was calling to let me know that unfortunately, my spot had been given to another student. I was confused because I never officially withdrew. She explained, "Your roommate called and said you asked her to let us know you were withdrawing from consideration due to your injuries. She mentioned you specifically said you wanted her to take your place since she was already prepared." I was stunned. When I told her I never said anything like that and was still interested if I recovered in time, there was this long pause. She said, "I'm so sorry, but we've already filled both spots. Your roommate interviewed yesterday using what she said was research you'd worked on together." That night, I confronted Chrissy over text, and her response was honestly chilling. She said, "Well, you couldn't go anyway, right? And I used your research to get in, so you technically contributed. I figured they'd rather give it to someone who was actually healthy." What made it worse was finding out she'd been telling people I was basically fine and just milking the situation for sympathy while I was dealing with a traumatic brain injury. When I finally got discharged 2 weeks later, I discovered she'd completely cleaned out all my research materials from our room. 3 years worth of my notes, bibliography cards, even photos I'd taken at museums, gone. When I asked for them back, she claimed they were collaborative work and she needed them for Florence. I had to get our RA involved and threatened to report her before she'd return anything. Even then, key pages were missing. 5 years later, after she'd done the Florence program and landed this great museum job, she reached out wanting to catch up. First thing she asked, whether I still had connections at art museums she could network with.